Welcome once again to Can I Be Honest? So we got another full week. We got a white lady pulls a gun on a black lady and her son, gets arrested with her and her husband. We got Kanye for President 2020. We got NBA jerseys with messages on the back, all different kinds. And the thing that we talked about is media bias, always trying to push us in one direction or the other, trying to divide us. So we're getting into all of this. If you're just joining us, thank you very much. Glad to have you here. Welcome you to share and invite other people that you think would be interested in any of these topics. Dewan, how you feeling this week?
I am excited to talk about some of these things. Some of these things I wish we did not have to talk about. I'm really excited to hear what you guys are thinking. I'm excited about somebody that we're going to have on, somebody that, probably has a difference of opinion on some of these subject matters than many of our viewers and our audience. And I'm excited because I think that that's where the magic happens when you can get people that don't necessarily agree, but can respect and hear each other out in their perspectives. So, obviously, we're not short of any subject matters when it comes to this stuff. And I think Ralph wants to let y'all know why.
This is America.
I have a dream.
These are animals.
America preaches integration and practices segregation.
Why did you say Mexico?
A rising tide of discontent.
The South will rise again. I have a dream.
We have contrasting visions about what America is. What America is. America is.
This is America.
All right, Dewan. So, Kanye for President 2020, what are your thoughts?
Get out and vote.
Yeezy.
Make your vote count, right? I wish I could say that it sounds like ridiculous, right? But I mean, we have a president that is, I guess, most recognized in recent years from like a television show, right?
Yeah.
A reality television show where it was just like you bring a bunch of, entertainers on there and have them do some stuff and, he'd fire them or not fire them, right? So
And his campaign ran a lot like, and even some of his presidency runs a lot like a reality TV show.
Yeah, good point. I don't understand. Like, I go back to when he was campaigning and the Republican Party had to pick their candidate. It seemed like nobody got the type of press that he did. Like, even if I think about elections before that, like, he was the only person that people wanted to hear from. And everybody thought that, okay, like, this will run its course. We'll kind of get some sound from him. Everybody wants to hear what's happening, hear what he has to say, and then we'll end up with the real candidate. And I mean, we look up, like, we're 4 years, going on 4 years into his presidency. So
Yep.
I struggle with just saying that it's ridiculous. And I mean, on top of that, like, we had a black president. I never thought that we'd see that either, right? So, like, I don't know what to expect when it comes to us and the way that we vote. I really don't know. So why not? You know what I mean? I say you should run, in 2024. Let's make it happen.
Yeah, so one of the things that's interesting about Kanye specifically is that you have there's a lot of things going on. One is that I find him as an individual completely unpredictable. I've seen him be all over the map in terms of messaging, in terms of his own behaviors and like, he is someone that's he doesn't paint inside the lines. And in some ways I appreciate that. In other ways, I kind of wonder what's going on. You see his recent backing of Trump and relationship with Trump and really supporting of Trump, which is leading a lot of people to say, like, look, this is really a plot against Biden to take some of the black voters, because at this point, if you ain't black, if you don't vote for Biden, you ain't black, like, out of his own mouth. And so this is a really interesting, what people are saying. To me, it looks like a ploy. I can't deny that, like, what people's initial response doesn't seem far-fetched for me. And also, like, the way that Trump thinks, I think it makes a lot of sense to use Kanye in this way. So who knows what happens? I I clearly do not think that he has any chance of winning. And I do agree that, people that vote for him, I don't view him stealing any votes from Trump specifically. So
let me say this. You've been begging for somebody to come and run as independent.
Man, that was the first thought. That was the first thought that I had.
Begging for this. So you hate Trump as an option. You hate Biden as an option.
I do. No.
You know what I mean? So
yeah.
Can we count on you? Ralph, can we get the banner up?
I hate this as an option too. Like it's ironic because I have been talking about this and I have wanted a different option, a third option. I'm like, this boggles me, like how bad it can be. Like, you know what I'm saying? It's like you figure that anybody who steps up has to be like heads and shoulders like a better, more stable. Let's just start there. Like I've seen the signs that say any responsible adult 2020. Like that's kind of where we're at. And then you have Kanye step up and just like, oh God.
He might have been watching our show. He might have heard you and said, like,
I'll be that guy.
Well, man, Steve, I'm gonna jump out here and give it a shot and see if we can make this country great. All right.
Yeah.
But that's all Kanye's gonna get on this show. I know that y'all want to talk about it. Like there will be an opportunity to ask questions.
Simone said not Kanye though.
Shoot some comments. Simone knows she was trying to get out there and worship with Kanye when he was here on his worship tour. On his out there. Stop front, Simone. But I'll say this: there will be an opportunity to ask questions about this, chime in on this, obviously, in your comments in the comment section, but also if you want to jump on with us and ask a question live in real time, there's a number that you can call, text that number, we'll get you the information to jump on here with us. 473-0499.
Yep. So in the meantime, if you could share with your friends, Ayana says she's going to hold her nose and vote for Biden. Might need an oxygen mask. So the next topic we're going to get into is the Jillian Wustenberg and her husband and the confrontation with a black lady and her daughter. And we're going to play the video. It's like a 3-4 minute video. It is not for kids. So there is some adult language and obviously adult behavior. So we're going to go ahead and roll that now, and then we'll come back, give our thoughts. Love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And let's go ahead.
Wants to violate a 15-year-old.
No, I'm asking a question. She's a child.
She bumped into me when
So she did something wrong. She needs to apologize. If she did
this ignorant woman bumped into a 15-year-old.
Right? Correct.
And you're on camera.
Okay.
You're feeling threatened.
Okay, well, go in.
No, Mom.
I got this.
You're blocking me from getting in my car.
No, we weren't. No, we weren't. You're ignorant.
Go ahead. Call them.
No, we will. But you're not going to sit there and violate a 15-year-old.
She's ignorant.
Do it, bitch. Do it.
Go ahead.
Do it. I want you to do something.
She's very ignorant.
Dumbass bitch. Yeah, I said it. You say something, I'll beat your white ass. I will. Do something. Please put your hands up.
Do something.
Please.
Who the fuck do you think you guys are?
Who do you think you are?
Your wife think you are.
You calling her name? She did nothing to you.
Yeah,
I didn't. I didn't. No, you didn't. You're very racist and ignorant.
You're racist because you're calling
No,
her
you
name.
bumped it. She bumped into me.
Why would you bump into
You
her?
cannot just walk
Why
around
would you
calling
bump her?
white
Why
people
would you bump her?
racist. This is not that
Why
type
would
of
you
world.
bump her?
White people
Why
are
would
racist.
you bump her?
No one's
Why
racist.
would you bump her?
I
Why
care
did you
about
say
you.
sorry?
I care
Why
about
did you say
you.
sorry?
And I'm sorry if you
Why
had
did you
an
say
incident
sorry?
that made
If you
someone
bumped
make
into
you
her,
feel
why
like
did you
that.
say sorry?
No one is racist.
If you didn't do
I'm
anything, why
sorry
did
if
you do
you
that?
had something like that happen.
Ignorant. Ignorant.
Okay.
Very. Ma, watch.
Get the fuck away from me!
You gonna get on her face.
You better get on my face
Right now, get away.
Get the fuck away!
Get the fuck
Get away. Get the fuck away.
Are you gonna hit? You gonna shoot me?
Get the fuck away.
Oh!
Get away. Call the cops right now. Call them.
Oh!
Call the cops.
Get the fuck away.
Call the cops.
Get away.
She got the gun on me.
Call
He
them
hit me
now.
with the car. Call telling. Get the
Call the cops.
Get the license plate. Get the license plate now. Cause you were never about to hit me with the damn car.
Don't you
about to hit me with the car? Both of y'all put guns on me. Okay? Call Richard back up to the police. Call Richard back up here now.
I got it.
Don't you fucking jump behind my car.
No, I ain't jumping on your car.
Don't you fucking jump behind my
Mom, stop moving.
Stop, Mom. Get the fuck back. Back the fuck up. No, you can't fucking leave.
You got all this on video?
Yes. Call the police. No.
Mom, stop walking.
Hello, police. Call the police. Can you come back to the police? Call the police. You fucking
They pulled the gun out on her. These white people, they're so racist. They pulled a gun out on my mama, both of them. It was a white lady and a white man.
Yeah, I got it. They pulled the gun out.
Yes.
So there's a lot going on in that clip, and it's rough. So I used to be a union rep, and as a union rep, if somebody that I represented wanted to file a grievance, I had to file the grievance for them, or I could find myself in trouble. Sometimes I get somebody that would want to file a harassment grievance, and when I looked and would investigate the situation, and this is somebody that's asking me that I've agreed to represent, but I've asked to elect me, and every now and then somebody would ask to file a harassment grievance. There's nothing there. There was just somebody there, like a supervisor, wanting them to do their job, and I always struggle with that because it's like, look, like, there's real harassment that takes place in the workplace. And unfortunately, when somebody cries wolf, it sets a tone where people are going to be skeptical when somebody is really dealing with harassment and they're looking to report it. In my opinion, that was not a blatant case of downright like racism. Right, like that was not like some folks coming from a place of hatred towards somebody because of the color of their skin. The crazy thing is, I saw an edited version of that video first.
Yeah, that's the one I saw.
Yeah, I saw
the edited version, and Ayana said different than what I thought had happened. I'd be curious to what you meant by that. Did you see the 1 minute clip as well, Ayana?
I saw the shorter video, and I was fully expecting it to be like something different than what it turned out to be. Right? I thought that it was like somebody something happened. I'll say this, in my experience, and here's something that like I've had conversations with a bunch of Black people about, like, in public spaces, like it has not been uncommon for me to experience white folk not wanting to say excuse me, right? Like you walking past them, they're taking space. Like, I don't know if it's a cultural thing where they just don't want to speak or whatever, but like not saying excuse me. And that's something that it's happened so frequently that when I'm around other Black folk, we have conversations about it, right? So I don't know what happened. I don't know if that's the case there. And it was a situation where they brushed up against each other. I think everybody's on 10 right now anyway.
Yeah.
So something that probably would have resulted in somebody saying, you could have said, excuse me, 5 months ago. Now it's like, oh, hell no. I know you didn't just bump into me. You must have lost your mind, and I'd hate to think that people are like seeking out experiences to like go viral or, put somebody or have their moment where they, just put somebody all the way in their place. I hate to think that that's where we're going, right? Now I'll say this: like, if you find yourself in a situation where somebody's tripping, then by all means, that those situations need to be addressed, right? And I'm not saying address them in a crazy way. I'm saying, like, do what's appropriate. Based on
which is what.
So if that's a situation, and I have a 15-year-old daughter, right? If I'm somewhere and somebody like bumps into my 15-year-old daughter and like just totally disregards her, like, I do want to address that, and I do want to have a conversation about that, right? Now, I'm not getting ready to like attack somebody that's obviously apologizing, right? Like, at a certain point, this lady was saying, look, like, if that's been your experience, I'm not like hating you. I apologize, right? Or I'm sorry that's happened to you. And at a certain point, the mom threatened the husband, and like, she brought race into it. She was like, "I'll beat your white ass." You know what I mean? It's like, it's just rough. Like I hate that happened. I don't want to give anybody, like, I don't call wrong right. You know what I mean? Like, I won't do that. You know what I mean? If it's me, if it's you, whoever it is. So she was wrong, right? But with the culture and climate where we are right now, everybody's on 10. You bring her child into the situation. You bring the race dynamic into the situation. You bring all the stuff that we've been watching, all the stuff we've been talking about. You put that, and she's viewing things from that lens. Like, I'm not surprised at all that it happened.
Yeah.
At all, right? But I just say that, like, I hope that that's a lesson to all of us to kind of like check our own pulse, see where we are emotionally. So we find ourselves in a situation, we're not doing what we are asking the police not to do, right? Like, everybody's asking the police to de-escalate situations, right? So, like, if I'm asking the officer to do that, I need to be willing and able to do that, or at least expect myself to be able to do that, right?
Yeah.
And they didn't de-escalate the situation. Those are my 2 cents.
Yeah. Yeah. When I watch it, it definitely, and I saw the 1-minute clip as well at first. That is just the lady with the gun out, and the caption was "Another Karen, blah blah blah," and it's just when you see the whole thing, it's very troubling. It's very troubling, and it definitely, like, with the context of everything else, I'm like, man, this stuff is going to, like, this is the kind of stuff, and the way this is handled, and even some of the comments that I saw with people talking about quote unquote Karen, just kind of out of control. And yeah, I don't think she should have pulled the gun either. I don't think that's the right move. But I would have, at that point, like, if the lady like gets behind your car and isn't letting you leave, I definitely would have called. I would have called that one in. And as much as I would try not to call the cops in that situation, like, I think she's getting to the point where she's feeling threatened, and she's feeling the tension of everything else. And I think all of us are at this kind of heightened state of awareness, heightened state of kind of racial awareness, racial tension. And these are the types of things, if we don't start doing something about it, then these are the types of things that are really going to start ramping up, and they're going to end differently than that one does too. So Sarah said she's late to the game, so she missed the can we post that, Ralph? Can you post that link to that video in the thing? It's just like a 4-minute video.
Yeah, I want to address the pulling the gun out as well, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, when she pulled the gun out, she put one in the chamber and she aimed it, right? So, like, anything goes wrong, she sneezes, somebody bump her from behind, anything happens, she's getting ready to like take somebody out. That's a problem, right? So I don't want to give her a pass on that either. I understand it. Like, when me and Steve was having this conversation, the way I said was like, if I'm getting into a confrontation with somebody and I'm armed, like, you almost have to pull, like, take your weapon, at least have it in your hand, because if you get into a physical confrontation and you have a weapon on you, then everybody's weapon, right? Like they have access to it as well. So I don't know if I would have had a problem with her like touching it, pulling it out or whatnot, but like her like cocking it and aiming at somebody that the most the lady was going to be able to do was like fight her, right? I mean, not to make light of the situation, but she probably could use some. What was Ice Cube's dad's name in Friday, right? It's like she probably could use one of those conversations, right? Like,
I don't think they ever said. Well, they might have. The mom might have said his first name. Mr. Man, I can't remember. I need to use the bathroom. That's the part.
Put the gun down.
Is it Mr. Jones?
Put the gun down, right? You know what I mean? It's like you might need to, like put your dukes up, put the gun down, and she'll be all right. But anyway, like I don't want to see anybody out there like physically assaulting each other. I don't want to see anybody getting shot or anything like that. But that's the reason we had these conversations, right? Like we want to create a space where you can come get some of this stuff out, where you find yourself the person in the middle of situations.
And I think what people have been, one of the things I've seen people say, which is similar to you, she racialized the situation. So we view the world through racialized lenses anyway, based upon our own experience and stuff. But she really did a job to make this about race. And I think that is, when you look at that, even we talked briefly, mentioned Jussie Smollett last week as in connection with the Bubba Wallace piece, and why that is so damaging for other, like when you see stuff like this damages like the ability to be able to have real conversations, because then people are like always questioning like, okay, but what really happened? Because you see stuff like this and you're like, oh, and this lady's crazy. And I think that really undermines our ability to have conversations with integrity. I'm curious what Saif has to say. Can we bring him on and see if he has any 2 cents on this? As we get into, we're going to start talking about media bias. Saif, welcome.
Hey, good evening, fellas. How you doing?
Great, Saif. Glad to have you on.
What would I wish that I could see from the video? And I'm sure, obviously, they were outside the whole time. So obviously, what I would like to see eventually come out is any surveillance that showed what that bump looked like. I mean, if we're talking about like I just went around and I just touched shoulders versus me going in there and smashing this little girl. I mean, obviously, as a parent, you're going to defend your child, and obviously, you might act on that in that situation. So, to me, I would like to see. Not that it really makes that big of a difference. End of the day, you point a gun for one reason and one reason only, and that's to shoot to kill. Period. And I'm sure you guys been to the shooting range and all that good stuff. Never, even when a gun is empty, I mean, that you point it anywhere, you're not making that happen. So to me, that factor is she has to dispute that she was in fear for her life enough to kill the individual, not to harm them, to shoot to kill. So that's where, for me, it gets a little extreme. And then, like I said, for me, I'm just curious to see what that bump looked like, because knowing how they were interacting outside, personally, I don't think it was a big deal, because if that was a big deal, then I might see some punches or something happening. So clearly nothing happened. It was just conversation that ended up to, a gun being pulled out.
Yeah. On that note, I would love to suggest that, anybody that's interested, check out Ta-Nehisi Coates' book, Between the World and Me. It's a letter that basically a letter that he wrote to his son. And it has a lot to do with like America feeling like in control of Black bodies. What happened was he had a similar incident. He was, I think, in a department store, if I'm not mistaken, and there was a white woman that was like rushing through. She bumped his son out of the way and continued to walk. He, I believe, did something like touched her grabbed her by her arm, like challenged her, corrected her, and at a certain point, some other people, a white man in particular, came to her rescue. And he was saying nobody came to the aid of his son, right? Nobody cared about that, but everybody wanted to come to her rescue. So I think that there is some context back there that's historical more than just in the moment, right? Where there is this fixation with America that they feel like they black bodies can be controlled, and one way is to call the police on people. So that's something I would say that if you're not aware of that, I'm not surprised if you're not aware of that. But for the most part, if you're black, you're probably very likely to be aware of that. So there's a lot more at play than just whatever that bump looked like, is all I'm saying. Between the world and me. Thanks, Steve, for putting that in there.
Yeah, but I wondered the same thing. I think everybody wondered that, like what actually happened leading up to this. I kind of read it like the lady was like pretty calm, trying to wait for her chance. Like I read that body language into like what's going on. But again, none of us can be there, and none of us really know like how anybody would respond in that scenario. Saif, we kind of like met through Facebook a while ago. You have some pretty significant thoughts on media bias, and as it relates to all of this stuff,
right?
The direction, the agenda of the media. What are your? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Of course. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read out 7 names. If you know any of those names, just say yes. Okay. So Ahmaud Arbery.
Yeah.
Trayvon Martin.
Yeah.
George Floyd.
Yeah.
Heather Mattia.
I don't know Heather.
Corey Ali Muhammad.
I do know him only because you brought him up.
Yep. Sincere A. Gatson. And then Justine Rizek.
No.
The first 3 individuals, obviously, all over the media with the police brutality and just absolute insanity that's been going on, which, obviously we've heard about. 4th individual that I brought in was my cousin. She is a convenience store owner that had to get on her knees along with her worker, ESO, in California several years back. 2 African-Americans walked in, told them to get on their knees. They did. Took everything from the store. Before they're leaving, they took a Hennessy bottle and then shot him execution style. That was covered briefly for a few minutes in the media, and that was it. And the only reason it was brought back in the media is because there's a coalition that joined for party store owners. They raised, I believe, $75,000 for information, and I think about a year and a half later, they made their arrest. Corey Ali Muhammad is an African-American that killed 3 people. And the reason why I bring him up is he went on a shooting spree that literally said, I have hatred for white people, particularly white men. Sincere A. Gatson was one of the children that just passed away this weekend in Chicago, where 4 children were shot, 18 dead, 47 were wounded. Out of the 4 children, 3 of those were African-American, and Sincere A. Gatson was an African-American child. And lastly, Justine Rizek is an Australian woman that was actually in Minnesota. So she actually called the police because she was screaming because she thought that somebody was being attacked in the alley. So she came out of her apartment. She was in her pajamas, and crazy story. What ended up happening is as she was coming down, no idea what happened. The police officer was driving, and then they pulled out a gun across their partner in the vehicle and shot this lady dead. So long story short, obviously, police officer was in prison, but that was a black police officer shooting her, and the only thing she had on her phone was a cell phone. And they admitted, like, obviously, this is real, this is what happened. But, the thing is, bringing up these names, I'm not here to point fingers. That's not why we're here. It's just really trying to understand the media bias. And I truly believe there is an absolute media bias. First 3 names, I mean, we could talk about police brutality until we die. I mean, that is real, of course. But for the other instances, like my cousin and all these other individuals, they're not making national news. They're not on the news every single day. There is no police reform. So for somebody to tell me that it's only a black thing, no, it's a problem with some police brutality in general. So, but all I hear is obviously just one color. And all I'm saying to you is there are other instances in both aspects.
Yeah. So I guess the question I have to you and Steve, I guess myself is that what you believe is being communicated is that it's only a black issue, that like that's the only like issue that's happening? Is that what you believe is being communicated, or are you saying that like there's an emphasis in one direction or another?
I'm sorry, are you asking me or Steve?
Both of you.
I mean, as of today, I believe really, to be honest, it's one way. I don't know the last time anybody who was not an African American was killed by police and this kind of publicity came through.
So question.
So wait, let me
go ahead, Steve.
If you're just looking at they don't explicitly say like affirm that, Dewan, but I think if you look at like what you actually see and what you see over and over again, I would say that it tends to be that. Like the number of police officers, when you talk about people going to jail, because I saw that comment too, police officers just get off. I mean, the numbers are ridiculous. And I think it's actually a mistake for us to make such a strong delineation there rather than to say like, damn it, like these are humans. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I'm not saying like the jumping on like all lives matter, so don't at me. What I am saying is like, instead of saying like, look, there is no justice here. I think you say that too. I think you say like, look, what is the ramifications? You know, where's the justice here? But I think you also say like, yeah, like that's messed up. And I want her to be one of the names in the list that we're fighting for too. So this stuff doesn't happen again. This Australian woman, she's like, her life matters in a way that, like, to honor, part of what honoring her is to like change some of these policies that are horrible and affect all of us. I think when we try to make such clear clear distinctions and delineations, I think we lose a lot of momentum. Rather than saying like, dude, it's about your kids too. Like, yeah, the likelihood of you dying as a white American at the hands of police unarmed is 3 times less than black Americans, but it's still a likelihood, and it's all a problem. Some of the tactics you see like are very much a problem, and it's a problem for everybody. And also recognize like it is not an equal problem for everybody. Like there are certain people within the population that are higher and more likely to have it be a problem for them. And so like that's how I prefer to frame it, because rather than trying to, I think when we try to focus so much, when we don't kind of open our arms, like I think that's the challenge that we get. I think we lose allies that we would otherwise have.
Yeah, I would say, like, these are some really good points, and I appreciate you, Saif, bringing up and bringing like real live stories, because I think that is huge, because nobody can deny that, right? I mean, people will figure out how to.
If you get a chance, Saif, Aunt Wafa had asked for you to post a link to your cousin's story whenever you get time. So
of course,
go ahead. Sorry, Dewan.
So no problem. But I think the thing that kind of stands out and is the stories that you mentioned, Saif, is that like people were eventually brought to justice, right? I think with the Australian woman, you described somebody reaching past his partner shooting. And you said they admitted that it happened. They admitted that it was wrong. He went to jail, right? Like prison time, right? I think that's one of the things that I think keeps this from being apples to apples, is that we're accustomed and we're used to people getting away with murder, right? When you say Trayvon Martin, right? Like we can't say that there's somebody locked up. Like dude sells his signature on Skittles bags. You know what I mean? The dude that killed him, right? Like there's a reward, if anything, right? Like the dude that Dylan Root, right? Like dude was treated to Burger King by the police officers on his way to prison, right? And given like forgiveness, right? Like from the people that had the loved ones that he murdered. So I think that there is a difference in that regard that I think we need to kind of take into consideration when we're talking about this. I've said this probably so many times on this show, but the idea of it being illegal to kill Black people in this country is fairly new, right? So like it was not illegal to kill Black people in this country. So like so the fact that we're still not seeing people prosecuted, police officers or otherwise, or highly pursued, right, for killing Black people, I think that's what makes some of this stuff like a problem. And I think that, you know, for me, I feel like we've seen Black folk on the bad side of the news story, like so much and so often that we're accustomed to that narrative. And I say we, I include myself in that, right? So to start to see a lot of emphasis put on like the police brutality and whatnot, like and that being something that's happening now, I think that it's foreign to us and it's fairly new to us. Not hearing Black people cry out, that's not new. We've been doing that. But to see it happen in the media, right, is something that's fairly new. And I don't know. I'm still open to asking the question, like, is the media biased? I mean, obviously the media is going to do whatever it takes to kind of like sell their story, and whatever like we seem to click on, that's the story that they're going to tell. So I get that, but like that's one of the things that I just want to point out, that the stories that you brought up, the people that you talked about, like they have somebody that's locked up right now, and we can't say that for all the other people, right?
I don't necessarily think that's true with police, though.
Can you get some of those comments in? Say that again, Steve.
I don't think that's necessarily true with police. I think we'd have to go look at the actual stats per number, because, you know, there's one article just searching online that says between 2005 to 2014, there's an estimated 10,000 Americans killed. 110 of those were criminally charged. So when you look at numbers, like just numbers wise, white people get killed more by police than anybody, and that's just because they're the dominant population. So if you take, so like most of those cases are white people, police officers aren't even getting charged. Yeah. And of those who got charged, 42 were convicted, 18 of those were currently pending at the time of this. So 50 were not convicted. So you have like
the interesting thing about stats is if you type in that stat, that's one thing, right? But if you type in a stat and say, how many of those people were armed? How many of those people were innocent? You know what I mean? Yep. How many of those people were running away from the police, right? With their back to the police, right? How many of those people charging the police with knives in their hands or a weapon in their hand, right? Like you have to take all of that into consideration as well. We can't just say a lot of white people get killed by the police too. You know what I mean? Like so we have to do a more focused data collection, if you will, right? We just can't say how many people have been killed. So if you can bring those numbers back and say that looks very similar, I'm like, you know what I mean? Like, interesting.
The deaths definitely do. Like I've looked at those numbers and I don't have them in front of me. But the deaths definitely do. They're similar ratios. As far as like out of those unarmed deaths, how many people make it to conviction process, like that we'd have to look up. So but that's what I'm saying. I think, you know, I just think we'd need more actual data to look at that.
And a lot of those cases I feel are very difficult. I mean, obviously we live in an age where you have a dash cam or body cam or something like that, where, you know, more than one person can make that assessment versus somebody who was there and somebody, you know, like a police officer making their own statement. So it's really, even just the video we just watched a second ago. So if that was, you know, a single perspective from the female and her daughter, she says white people are racist. She's calling 911, like, you know, she's going to get killed. That's her perspective, right? And then you get the other end from the camera. So I think obviously moving forward, having the cameras in there obviously allows us and allows a court of law to make a better judgment, other than, you know, somebody who's dead and, you know, police officers, a bystander's voice.
Yeah.
So, Saif, I got a question for you. A little going in a slightly different direction. So we met as part of a show that I was on for a church. What do you think the role is of evangelical Christians in all of this?
That's a really good question. So race issues come up multiple times, and then for my church, pastors mention it multiple times. So what's really interesting about this is people think that this is new. This is nothing new. And what I mean by new, this has happened before, when Christ was with us and before he was even here. Notice that somebody came to earth who was perfect, trying to save sinners. And what do we do to him? We put him on a cross. His own people put him on a cross. So what the church needs to do is really help people understand that I personally, and this is my opinion, we do not have a race problem. I do not believe a single % that we have a race problem. And you could disagree. That's perfectly fine. I think we have a sin problem. No problem. Of course. I respect that, brother. I think we have a sin problem. And what I mean by sin problem has everything in it. So a sin problem looks at anything that is different and tries to attack it. So what I mean by that is, again, I lived in the Middle East. The Middle East, at some point when Saddam Hussein was there, you had the Sunnites and Shiites. They're both Muslim. When he left, they start killing each other. So before they killed each other, they killed the Catholics. And that's the Chaldeans that lived up north. Once Saddam left, they killed all the Catholics, or tried to, and then they start killing each other. So that's prevalent really anywhere you see it. Even in Africa at the time, about 1518, I believe it was, you had the northern tribes of African Americans actually had white slaves. That's not in the history books because obviously people don't mention that. There were freed African Americans that owned African Americans. So I'm not here to point fingers. I'm just saying this has been happening in our history. And then as far as the church, it just reminds us that, and like I said, and it was really interesting. There was a book, and one of the characters, I'll just mention his name. His name is William Ellison. In the 1850s, he pretty much said, he says, if you were a freed slave and you wanted to be part of the middle class, you were never going to be in the middle class unless you owned slaves. So there were actually hundreds of freed African Americans that enslaved other people, which to me is crazy. And the only reason that they were saying they were doing that is they wanted to hit the middle class. So to me, I keep saying this is a sin problem because, again, man is looking at another man, their own and different, white, black, whatever it is, as an object. So when you look at that as an object, then you're like, okay, I'm going to make a profit out of this person. So the church reminds us that we are all made in the image of Christ. Everybody is made perfect. And if we don't treat each other as that, as truly brothers and sisters in Christ, then you start getting all these divisions. You start seeing race, you start seeing color, not in a way, again, that's going to build each other up, is obviously what you guys are trying to do. You see it as being a threat. So again, and the Bible speaks of that. The Bible obviously has Cain and Abel right from the beginning, obviously attacking each other. And they did it with a stone. So, you hear about gun violence, you hear about that, get rid of the guns. They did it back in the day with stones. We could go back to doing that if all the guns are removed. So to me, it's a sin problem, which could be, multiple different ways. Like obviously we're talking about these issues, and I could give you plenty more.
Yeah. So yeah, we could definitely give each other a bunch of examples and whatnot. I said, so I'll circle back to one thing really quick.
Sure.
I think thinking about, without having a discussion about like the police thing and the way it's reported and whatnot, I would say remembering that the police, like the birth of the police in this nation, had a lot to do with policing Black folk, right? And protecting white folk, possessions, and capturing Black people, right? So like the birth of what we call like the police force or system today, that's kind of where it came from. So I think kind of understanding that. Do we have a sin or a race problem in this country? I would say both. I think that, this country has allowed itself to say that it's a Christian country while doing some really crazy stuff that looks nothing like Christ at all. And that makes me less worried as a Black man, like about making sure that we all love each other, and more like saying, look, if somebody does something crazy to me or somebody that looks like me, I just want the penalty to be consistent across the board, right? Because I mean, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, right? So like it talks about fear before it talks about love. So I want somebody to be worried that there's going to be a price to pay if they are not doing what they say they believe at the end of the day. So like that's kind of like my 2 cents on that. I really appreciate, Saif, you being bold enough to come bring a different perspective to this space, because that's the only way like we really can grow. We can be stretched. We can like wrestle through some of this stuff. I want to encourage anybody that wants to jump on again to text that number, jump on, bring your comments, your thoughts. Steve, can you shoot us a couple of those comments that we've seen? I think we got about 30.
So the recent comments, I want you to articulate what's the practical, what do you do practically as a Christian? Like they understood, 2 people that actually said, you got Rahman, and then someone else was like, yeah, that's the same thing I was thinking. So that's the question. Like as a believer, what do you do? So we got the ideology, and I think, yeah. So what is your role in seeing, the love of Christ manifested in the earth?
Absolutely, and like I said, the biggest thing for me, I have to imitate what Christ has done. So obviously, when those are warning, that's what we do. We are with them. We support them. And I am not here to pass judgment on anybody. And I think that's what happens a lot of times. You see somebody who's Black, and then you're like, okay, Black people do X, Y, and Z. You see somebody who's Middle Eastern, they do that. So my role is not to see color, not to see that. I want to see every single person as an image of Christ. And when they fail, my goal is not to see them on the ground and stomp on them. My goal is to think, how can I, with the obviously power of Christ, try to lift them up with my ability. And a lot of times I don't have those answers. And for me personally in my life, I sit there and I pray about it. I'm like, you know what, Lord, I don't know what these times are doing. It's very confusing. I'm in my house. I live in Troy. Whoever I am with, obviously help me share your word. So, but the biggest thing is what we see here is a lot of times what I see in the media and all these places is you see somebody who's different on the ground hurting. And again, you might not agree with them. And that's not the point of brotherhood, is not to agree. Because I disagree with a lot of people, but that does not mean I don't love them. And again, I do not pass judgment on those people, because I don't know what they've been through. So like the video we just seen a second ago, somebody pulling a gun, I don't know what's going on in their mind. And obviously that's why we have a court of law. And that's why obviously we have a legal system. But to me, in any instance, in that situation, just to use that for an example, if you were just to maybe exercise 5% of kindness, that escalation should have never went anywhere. There was a bump, conversation should have happened, a sorry, I'm whatever the case is, and that's it. But you realize where people feel entitled to, an apology, people feel entitled to X, Y, and Z. For me, to be honest, if that happened and I knew somebody was being hostile, I'll pick up and go. Because what you found out is people have guns and people are not scared to pull their guns. So to me, it's like, okay, is it really worth it to have this conversation with somebody right now and to risk these things versus, let's just forgive, let's forget, let's move forward. And obviously there's a boundary, because I'm sure some people are like, how much forgiveness can you do to where police are shooting people? Okay, that's a different story. Again, that's why we have a legal system. And that's why obviously people are going out there and protesting and wanting to see change, and your voices are being heard. But to me, is the biggest thing I say is that when a brother is on the ground, we do not stomp on them, agree or disagree. And again, when you disagree with somebody, the last thing you want to do is give them a hand. But guess what Christ did? He came on this ground and he walked the earth, and he's seen tax collectors, he's seen prostitutes that people wanted to just absolutely demolish and throw rocks. They were the little things on earth. And what did he do? He made them followers, and he made them inheritance in his kingdom. So if we could learn from that and think about his forgiveness that he's allowed all of us, and the biggest piece really is if we at least attempt to mirror that and ask him to be back in our lives and be back into our households, into our churches, into our schools, I mean, that'd be really, really big, because right now in media, when was the last time anybody mentions anything about the church? There's a few channels that do, but for the majority of the time, it's a separation. Again, I respect people's religious preferences, right? But at the same time, what I've seen is, personally, the more we take Christ out of our lives, who is the creator of all that is seen and unseen. He made the manual for all of us. So you take the person who created us and you put him on the side, and he's watching us, and you think to yourself, I'm gonna figure this out. I'm gonna create a chop zone where there's no police and there's no problems. And guess what? It takes one bad apple to shoot a 19-year-old, and that's it. So I think that's what we're forgetting. It doesn't take 90% of evildoers to do that. It takes a few people, obviously, to cause these things. So for me, like I said, the forgiveness is probably the most important thing that we can do to move forward. Obviously, having these conversations, but at some point, we have to have these conversations, and we have to forgive our brothers and sisters and move forward. And if it happens again, we have discussions. But if we never forgive and we hold on to these things, it's very unhealthy in our relationships together, with our household, with our friends and family. And again, it just causes us actually more damage than it causes the other person.
Yeah, I'm afraid that America has preached that forgiveness stuff without like preaching repentance, right? So like, I think that we have that, and that's like been out of balance. So there's been a call to forgiveness, saying, look, like, let's stop talking about that. Like, let's let some of that stuff go. But there has not been a call for repentance. There has not been a consistent, like, saying, America, like, you got this wrong. Like, you don't practice what you say you believe, but you want other people to, you know what I mean? So that's what I think, you know, and I think that it'd be foolish, right? I think it'd be foolish if you are a Black person to wait for America to do that, right? To wait for America to say, you know what, like, we're going to practice the principles of Christ, right? Because we have not done that on a consistent enough level or basis to really trust that it's going to happen. You know what I mean? So I think that it's kind of like even painful to hear like that one-sided approach to this, and it's forgiveness. I've talked to some of the folks I've talked to people face to face that have forgiven, like Dylan Roof. Like, I've talked to one of the people who's had a family member killed by Dylan Roof, who's forgiven him. And, you know, my challenge to him was, with all due respect, I have not experienced what you've gone through. And like, I'm hesitant to even say this, but if you forgive Dylan Roof, sir, Dylan Roof is locked up. He's no longer a threat. So if he comes to Jesus, cool. If he does not, he's not a threat to me anymore. If I teach my children to give blind forgiveness without calling people to repentance, like, you're in harm's way. You know what I mean? And if somebody's going to, if you're just going to continue to forgive, which understand, I'm somebody that believes in forgiveness. So I'm not preaching don't forgive. I'm just saying, let's give a balance. I think that America needs a prophet, right? I don't think that people that have been victimized need somebody come and tell them to forgive. Master that. You know what I mean? I think America needs a prophetic voice saying, yo, Christians, you haven't practiced what you said you believe. It's time for you to get it right.
So just,
you know
I want to be clear. I'm not saying to forgive and that's it. By no means am I saying that. Nowhere in the Bible does it actually teach that. So if you have open conversations and you try to tackle this on all day, every day, but in the midst of that, all I'm saying is, in the midst of you guys having your shows and doing all these things, I'm going to forgive those that have done wrong against me today. And I'm going to move forward in trying to, again, bring justice and bring issues and just bring everything on a platform so we can discuss it. So yeah, I'm not saying just forgive and forget and like that. No, I'm saying the healthy part is to forgive these people, because if you let them in your household, in your mind, and in everything that you're doing, you're causing yourself and everybody around you a ton more harm. So I'm saying is the healthy way is to forgive and then work internally, externally with whomever to come to a solution. That's all I'm saying. And the reason for forgiveness is very simple, because Christ forgives me every single day. I sin every single day, multiple times a day. And every time I do that, he allows me to be forgiven. And he says, if you forgive your brothers and sisters, I will do the same for you. So for me, I don't want to be Christ to anybody. I don't want to be anybody's judge. I want forgiveness as much as everybody else. So therefore, I just try to give it freely, in the sense that I don't want to hold it, because he's not holding it against me. But at the same time, it's not saying that, it's okay to kill. It's okay to do harm. Absolutely not. I mean, we're going to get justice. This is never going to finish, because, again, we have this sinful body that this is an issue today. In 50 years, you're going to have 13 other issues that are happening. So it's important to forgive, but it's also important, obviously, to get justice and have these conversations in a healthy way, that it's not damaging your brothers and sisters. It's not damaging that I could look at Steve right now, and all I could think to my head is he's white, and I look at you and I think, oh, he's black. So I can look at you as, again, brothers in Christ, which is what I'm hoping for everybody, and just having open conversations instead of just coming to any conversation with my own bias without hearing anything.
Yeah.
That's good.
Steve,
Steve,
thanks for
quiet.
coming. No, I was gonna say thank you for coming on. We got somebody else about to jump on with us. We're trying to wrap up the show soon. I really appreciate it. I actually really love how you started the show with the names, and I thought that was a great way to come in. So I appreciate you, man. Really do. And congratulations on you have a newborn, right?
Yeah, 3 months old, man.
Congrats.
Sweet.
Thank you. Hey, God bless
All right.
you guys. Keep it up, and I'll be praying for everybody.
Hey,
You too.
appreciate it. Thank
man.
you.
Take care.
You too. All right, Sarah Ray's coming on. My quick thoughts. Yeah, I love the idea of forgiveness. I think love is at the core of everything, and part of what that means, it is the repentance thing. It is kind of turning from doing one thing and doing something else. So justice has to be a strong component. Like it's all tied together. So if we have to work for change and actually see change, I think that the silence of much of the evangelical church, when a lot of these things are coming out, and silence, apathy, and at times like working really hard on when you look at the timelines of certain pages, you're like, wow, dude, like what is really going on? It's just like, this does not represent the love of Christ. Like, you know what I'm saying? Somebody's dead, they're not coming back, and this is what you're posting about. Like you're doing like everything to kind of like undermine like the life of this person or whoever. I've been really disappointed with the response of the church, honestly. So Sarah Ray.
Hi. I don't know if you can see me this time. I think I worked out some of the tech issues.
All right, we can see you.
We got you. What's up, Sarah Ray?
Hi, gentlemen. Thanks for having me on again. I know you're wrapping up, so I'll be super quick. But I just had some thoughts to kind of what Saif was saying, but also to Steve's question about the evangelical church. And our church service is still online out here in California, but we had a guest minister today speak, and it was actually a woman, and she spoke about where to start. And she said, it's so confusing because there's this list of books, but then there's this list of documentaries, and there's this conversation, but you need to speak up, but you shouldn't speak up, and all of this kind of confusion. And she said, where do I start? And she said, I started to tell people, just pick one thing. Pick one thing. Start in your lane and then branch out. So she said, some people are called to be out there and march. Some people can't march, so they pass out water bottles. Some people are the counselors. Some people are the teachers. Some people are out there experiencing it, but pick a place to start. Do one thing. And then the other piece of it, and I think you cannot speak about forgiveness without talking about the power differential. And I think that is such the mistake that Christians make. They miss the mark about power. And when you are extending forgiveness to someone, that is putting you in the position of power. And so when Saif was talking, that was the part, and this isn't a personal attack to you, Saif. I was hoping you'd still actually be on. But I think so many Christians talk about, well, I'm just going to extend forgiveness and I want forgiveness. But forgiveness puts it on this deservedness, which I'm not even sure if that's a word. But it's this idea of we as Christians, yes, we are absolutely called to forgive. But you know what else we're called to do? We are called to confront. We are called to come out of our comfort zone and to say, I see this and I see you. Christ saw the suffering. He didn't brush aside the people that he encountered. He didn't turn his cheek to the things that they experienced and the things that they suffered. He took the time to speak to the adultering woman. He took the time to speak to the bleeding woman. He took all of the time to speak to the men that he mentored and taught. And he saw them for what they were and the struggles that they endured and the experiences that they had. And he didn't brush it over and say, go forgive. He acknowledged it. He made them aware that they were seen, that their experiences were valid and real. And then he talked to them about the importance of being set free through forgiveness, which was for their benefit, not the offender. And so as a white woman who has not experienced racism, the only thing that I have that I can pull from my own experience to try to gain some traction of where to start is when I came forward as a young woman who had been incested, when I approached the church and said, this is what's happening to me, the response was, well, have you forgiven him? It wasn't, let's work on your healing. Let's help you. Let's validate your experience. Let's pray for you. Let's come around you as a church. I was punished because I wasn't ready to immediately erase 19 years of abuse. And so when I try to dig deep into my empathy bank or my tank to figure out how can I stand alongside, I'm a white woman who's not experienced racism, but how can I dig into my own experience and figure out what is something that struck a chord with me? Not in a comparison way, but in a how can I help to gain some understanding so that I can gain direction in how to respond. And I think, again, you can't have that forgiveness conversation without recognizing that it's putting you in the power seat. I'm giving this person my forgiveness. No. I need to come alongside that person and acknowledge their suffering and to help them to feel seen and to understand what is it that they need from me in this moment. It's not about, oh, let me help them to forgive. And I think the biggest piece of it that's missing from so many Christians, and myself included, is the humility to confront it and to say, we have all at one point, and that was today's sermon, is every single one of us has judged someone else for something external, whether it's the way they talk, their skin color, their home, their car, their job, their money, whatever the case may be, we have considered ourselves better. And James 4, someone was asking earlier where it is in the Bible, it's in James 4. To consider none better than ourselves, because Christ died for every single one of us equally. He didn't spend more time on the cross for that guy's sins than he did for mine. He didn't spend more time on the cross for my uncle's sins than he did for mine. He was right there with both of us in mind. And he put the forgiveness possibility in our hearts. But again, forgiveness is a two-way street. There's repentance and there's forgiveness. I have forgiven my abuser. He has not repented. He has not admitted to what he has done. He has destroyed a family. And yet at the end of the day, he no longer has power over me. But I don't give him the power of saying, I'm going to forgive you and continue down this path. And I think so many times we don't dig into those experiences for ourselves. So sorry, that was like 3 or 4 minutes of just a big verbal dump.
It was
I'll stop
amazing.
talking now.
Thank you.
Sorry, I was stressed cleaning and nervous before I came on, so forgive me. Speaking of forgiveness.
I'm very, very impacted by your story. I appreciate your vulnerability. I actually think that being vulnerable is one of the missing components in our culture that is kind of like a wild card, secret weapon, basically, to get into people's hearts and minds effectively. I think we're so used to being bombarded with information and statistics and violence that we can often just fire a response. And I think that I think your analogy was spot on, and I really, really appreciate your vulnerability. And I think that is something that can cause people to pump the brakes for a minute and stop and really think about what you're saying and the dynamics there. Thank you.
Thank you. I learned it from Oprah. she talked about that one day years ago, and I remember in high school seeing it, and she said, if you haven't had that experience, dig as deep as you. It was about acting. It was an acting lesson she had taken when she was in The Color Purple, and they said, dig deep into that memory that you've had that's similar, and you will cry on demand. But I remember that, and I play that in my head every day as a psychologist of what emotional, if I'm struggling to find grace or find empathy or find a way to feel and be authentic without taking away that person's experience, that's what I dig for. And that's what I had said in the comments of, we have to be humble enough as evangelical Christians to ask God to illuminate. Have the courage. The first thing I pray for is the courage. Practice your courage every day of asking God, give me the courage to truly pray for illumination. And then when that illumination comes, give me the humility to accept what you reveal, and then give me the strength to do something about it. We're all there. We've all done it. And if we had that approach, instead of being so defensive, I think we'd actually get some traction.
Yeah.
Sarah Ray, I will talk to you soon.
Okay.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for opening up.
Thanks, fellas. I don't know how to hang up.
You're getting a lot of comments. A lot of people are saying thank you for sharing, and they feeling what you're saying. So
yeah.
I don't know
Ralph,
how to hang up, so
Ralph will hang you up. Bye. We were also going to talk about the basketball jerseys. I actually think that would really change the tone of this show. So my personal opinion is that it'd be better just end it, and then we can put a couple, at least one video out this week on YouTube of us just talking about that. If you guys are interested, Dwan, do you have any strongly different opinions?
No, I'm good. I mean, that's something that we can talk about. We can give you our thoughts and put on that stuff at a later date. I mean, Sarah dropped some heavy stuff. We're already talking about heavy stuff. About Safe and his family and what they experienced and what he shared.
Yeah, man, he got me with that one with his cousin too. Like all of that stuff. Yeah, it's a lot.
That's real heavy stuff. And he's again like they bringing it home, and it's really, real people. Yeah, so leave it there. I got some interesting thoughts that I'll share with you offline once we jump off, but process some stuff with you. But I really appreciate the perspectives. I appreciate the folks that jumped on here and shared. I appreciate the people that are blowing up our comment section. Ayana, Simone, Kathleen Sly, Rama. Thank y'all for hanging out with us. Crystal, I see you. Jason, I see you. You want Steve? I think you want Sarah Ray for president in 2020. Yeah, maybe I don't know. Maybe she
could be VP for Kanye.
Kanye, that's what I was going to suggest. You read my mind.
Oh man, Stephen Marshall, man, I got to get you on this show. Wagwan. Jamaican and Canada with some a lot of great points. Aunt Wafa, thank you for being on here. Appreciate your engagement. Yeah, man, we'll be back next week, and in the meantime, we'll drop our YouTube channel link in the comments also. Yeah, we're never short of having anything to talk about, so we'll be back here next week. Ralph?
This is America.
I have a dream. These are animals.
America preaches integration and practices segregation.
Why did you say Mexico?
A rising tide of discontent.
The South will rise again.
I have a dream.
We have contrasting visions about what America is.
This is America.